and for joining us for our SIS Customer Education webinar. Today we're going to give you some great tips for some unused things that you might not even know about in Dynamics SL, and also some tips and tricks. Dan, I'm going to now introduce Max Thomas, who's our host today, and he will be introducing, telling you a little bit about SIS, and also introducing our today's presenter, Dan Walsh. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Debbie. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining our webinar today. As Debbie said, I'm Max Thomas, and we're certainly excited about presenting some of the tips and tricks in Dynamics SL, as well as some of the ways to optimize your SL solution. I think we had a network issue there.
We're back.
Great, Dan. Next slide.
I think we're back. Hold on.
Yes, we are.
Can you forward the slide, please, Dan?
Yeah, I'm waiting for it to reconnect for some reason. I've been on here for the last 2 hours and had no problems. So just bear with us, everyone. Thank you. Yeah, Debbie, I literally been on this computer for the last 3 hours. Let me try and reconnect. One second. Sorry, everyone. I'm just waiting for it to reconnect. Stop sharing for 1 minute. Reconnecting, hold on. Okay, I think we're back. Matt, can you see the screen okay?
Yes, I can, Dan. Well, we all have our technical issues sometimes. Apologize for that, ladies and gentlemen. So I would assume you can advance the slide now. There we go. Great. So as you can, yeah, there you go, Dan. Thank you. So as many of you know, we've been around for some time. We're over 2 decades old. We've been serving the industry and SL customers for quite some time. And we focus on helping you unify your business processes and applications across your enterprise and giving you better visibility into your business and hopefully more efficiency. These are the industries we focus on, obviously all project and service-driven companies. We certainly have talent around inventory management, fabrication, manufacturing, and other necessary solutions in your industry. And Of course, we want you to feel excited about partnering with SIS. We are a Microsoft Gold certified partner with 20 years plus experience serving SL customers. We actually started the SL users group long ago. We have a dedicated support line and customer care team, and we're certainly experienced from the development team to our functional consultants and partners here at SIS. We focus on understanding your industry and best practices so we can bridge that gap between business and technology. Our broad industry focus and solution offering is really all across all Dynamics products, including Dynamics 365 and Microsoft SharePoint. And with that said, I will turn it over to Dan and tell you a little bit about housekeeping tips. We are recording the presentation in case anyone would like to see it later or miss some of it. And if you want to optimize your viewing, there's a button in the top, the Zoom button. You can hit full screen and your presentation will be larger on the screen because this is a GoToMeeting webinar. And at the end, we'll have Q&A session for anyone that has any questions at all. And you can type your questions ahead of time into the question box on the webinar. And with that said, I'll introduce our presenter who's going to get into the SL solution for you. Thank you, Dan.
All right, thank you, Max. Hi, everyone. Max said I'm Dan Walsh, and I've been with SIS for a little over 8 years now. And I've been working with Dynamics SL/Solomon for almost 18 years. And my background is in accounting, degree in accounting, and I worked, part of that 18 years, I was actually a controller for a company that used Dynamics SL. So I've been on kind of both sides of the aisle. So I always try to appreciate, our users and what they're going through. I also manage a support queue and do a lot of the support requests for SIS that come in from our customers. So some of you on this, I may have worked with you before. If not, I would certainly look forward to working with you in a support capacity. So what we're going to do today, we have about 5 different areas we want to look at. The first one is menu maintenance. And in SL, the menu, I think for the users is, it's the first thing that they see. We want it to be clean. We want it to be efficient. We don't want things there that we don't need. But of course, we want everything there we do need. So we're just going to look at the menu, how it can be customized, and a few of the features for the menus. And I'm going to do everything right in SL. I'm not going to be showing you a bunch of PowerPoint slides. We're going to actually be in SL. So I'm going to go into SL. Thought it was logged in. The menu maintenance is typically something that's going to be managed by some type of an administrator within the organization. There's an actual screen called menu maintenance. But when you log in, you're going to see down at the bottom left, you have your list of what are called module groups. Like financial is a module group, and then within the group, there's our modules. And then within each module, we have the different sections: maintenance, input, processes. Then we have the actual screens or reports. So there's 4 sections involved with each menu. So if we look at how we manage those menus, that's all done through menu maintenance. But it's also done through groups. So every menu that an individual user sees is made up of the groups that they belong to. And you can actually access the 3 other screens that kind of are relative to the menu maintenance right from this related screens option. So if you look at the groups, in this case, we have a bunch of different types of groups. We have approvers, we have a controller group, right? Customers, we have a repair shop group. So depending on if you're in one or more groups, you're going to see the menus that are a combination of all those groups. So if we were to pick up, let's take a look at the customer service group. Okay, I'm not sure why that didn't put. So we'll pull up the controller group. So it's going to show you each project module group that they belong, and then the individual modules in here. So the way it can be maintained is we can come in here and add screens to each one of these, or we can remove screens. So if we have a group of people that are just accounts payable people, and they're not allowed to write checks, they're only allowed to enter vouchers, we may remove from their group the ability to write checks. So I can come into a particular screen if I have the access rights to this screen, and I can remove items. Vice versa, I can add items. And I can come back over to accounts payable. Since we took that report out, I could come back over. It's quickly, easy as dropping and dragging, and I can put that back in here. And it'll show up at the bottom. The other thing that you can do with the menus, you can actually add non-SL related types of access, like Word documents or Excel spreadsheets. So if I go into, let's see here, I wanted to be in customer service. It shows up now. I'm not sure why that's not pulling the repair shop. Okay. So in the approvers one, we have the order management module. We have orders and inventory. So under the order management, I set up 2 links that are going to show up on the menu. We go back into here to orders, order management, get down under inquiries. I have a spreadsheet and a Word doc. And again, I just named them for the type of document they were. But what it does is we have a link here that actually opens up the Office program, and then it'll also open up that document. So in the menu area, we can not only just add and remove SL items, we can add external links. It could be a PDF, it could be a Word doc, it could be Excel, any one of those. So if I would go back into spreadsheet and just click on it, you can see it'll open up that spreadsheet for me. And so it's always going to open up the most current version of this. So if we have a spreadsheet and we're constantly changing it or other people are working on it, it'll always open up, and then you can save the most current version so you can make changes to it if needed. So it's kind of a nice feature to be able to add those types of documents, external documents. Some people will take the menu too, and they'll actually put in like a process. So they might create a group under menu maintenance, and they may have a group called, let's say, AP check writing. So for the AP check writing group, right, maybe they have 2 or 3 different people that are in that group. We might add like the payment selection menu, we might add the check preview menu, we may add the cash requirements report, right? So we may add 4 or 5 different things, and that's all going to show up under a module group over here called check writing. Like here's one's called month-end closing. So this walks through the steps to do a month-end closing. So the menu maintenance is very, very flexible, which is one of the nice things about SL. It's very customizable. And I think the menu area is very important because that's really what the users see. That's what they're interacting with the most. So it's always good to check and get input from your users and say, some users might have too much stuff, or maybe they have to go somewhere else to get something, and it's not efficient for them to kind of work through the different processes. So it's always good to look at the menus and look at it from a user standpoint and kind of find out what's good for them and see if there's any issues. And as for all the things that we're going to look at today, some of them will be, definitely have to be done by an administrator. You don't want everyone going in and updating menus. A lot of the items will be like that. Other ones will be, just on the user level. So I always encourage all of my clients, to talk to their users and to find out, if there's anything that kind of bothers them when they go into SL and they're doing this, or this takes too long, or it's too cumbersome, or I can't do that. And, just kind of take a poll and find out what kind of things are bothering them. And a lot of them sometimes are just interface-based, just the menu. So I really like the menu maintenance. And when we get a new customer, we always spend a lot of time setting that up the way they want it. But I find sometimes we have current customers who could use some maintenance like that too. So, okay, that's the menu maintenance. Back to the PowerPoint. Role centers. Okay, this is a really interesting area in SL that is absolutely underutilized. but I think it has a really neat functionality, and I think it's something that a lot more companies could utilize. We did a demo recently for a client that was looking at, potential client that was looking to move to SL. And what they did was they brought in medical equipment to get repaired, inspected, repaired. If it could get repaired, they would repair it and send it back. Or if it was not repairable, they'd send them a new one. So they had a lot of kind of things that they needed to monitor where items were in certain points in time. So we created some specific role centers for them. The way the role center works, it's all dependent upon a group. Just like the menus are set up by groups, the role centers are also set up by groups, okay? So if we go into, and it's all done through the access rights. And if you're not familiar with access rights, really this just determines what any particular user who belongs to that group, what screens and reports they have access to. So if we were to bring up the repair shop, all companies, and there's a tab on the access rights maintenance screen called Role Center. And this is where you can add roles. And with SL, there's 3 standard roles. There's accounts receivable, accounts payable, and projects. But what we did was we looked at the requirements for this customer, or potential customer. We realized they had some things that were really unique that the Role Center would benefit them. So we created our own roles. Okay, and there's two functions within the Role Center. There's activities and then there's lists, right? So here's something I have to do, and then here's a specific list of those things that need to get done. And that's what's set up in here, right? The ACT is the activity, this is the list, right? So you can see we set up a whole bunch of different ones, but the standard ones are payables, receivables, and project. We added these other ones, and it wasn't really that difficult to do. You know, required some customization, but it, you know, for each one of these that we set up, it was maybe a couple hours worth of work on our end. So we felt that it was absolutely very beneficial for this client to have something like this available to them. And I think you'll see that when I open up the Role Center. So it's all controlled by access rights maintenance, these Role Centers. So if I belong to the repair group, when I log into SL, I'll see that Role Center. If I'm an SL user and I don't belong to any groups that have Role Centers set up, I will not see that Role Center under my home menu. Right? It always resides under the home menu, but I won't see this. It just won't be there. So in this case, we have 4 different ones set up for the group that sysadmin is in. You can see we have the accounts payable and accounts receivable. It's kind of like a dashboard, which is why I like it. So instead of having to go run a report of the payables and then have to look at it and say, okay, what's in the current, what's in the past due, this is going to tell me that I have 14 payments that are past due, and it's going to tell me who they are. So I like that. To me, that's almost like a dashboard. It's showing me what's there. And this is standard. This list here is standard, but we could add other ones to this. But we took and said, okay, for the customer service people, they get these orders in, and when the order comes in, it gets inspected, and it goes through a bunch of steps. And at a certain point, different people are going to have different responsibilities to do something. So we wanted this customer service people to say, okay, what repair quotes are out there that I need to review and I need to approve? And then listen, right now there's just one out there. And it's an order, it's a sales order. Because when they receive these in, they actually enter a sales order and order management. And if you're familiar with order management, it has all these steps that, you know, an order goes through. In this case, we have a receiving, we have an inspection, we have a repair, and then we have a ship it back to them. You know, those are kind of the 4 basic steps. In this case, we set up whenever it's unapproved, that means it hasn't been released yet. So if it hasn't been released, it's going to be in this list. If I click on this, double click on it, it'll actually open up the sales order screen. So I know I have something to do. I can go in here and review that sales order and then take it to the next step. I can release this order. So I like the Role Centers. I think they have a lot of potential. I think they're underused right now. So it's certainly something, you know, for you to look at and to think about, how would this fit in our organization? Is this something that we could implement? I mean, I would love to. Like I said, I'm really hoping that we get this client because this is something unique. And I think it's really efficient versus having to run reports, having to go into the shipper screen, you know, doing F3 on all the shippers, see which ones are open, et cetera, et cetera. So it gives some real quick visibility into certain areas of the operations of the company. So that's the role centers. Again, I really like it. I'm going to try and push it for more of our customers. Document share, which is really document attachment. It's setting up attachments. And this came into SL about three versions ago. I think in 7.0 it came in, maybe 7.0.6.5. I have a lot of clients that use it, but I don't think I have a lot that use it as much as they could or they should. But the concept is that you have a screen in SL. It could be a journal entry screen, it could be a voucher screen, it could be a project screen, it could be a service call, whatever it is. Every screen in SL has the ability to attach a document to that individual item. So if we're going to go into AP vouchers, we're going to enter a voucher, and we wanted to add maybe the terms and conditions, you know, or let's say we're doing a purchase order, it might be more applicable for that. But if we're going to do a PO, and we could say we got something from, you know, from this vendor, or we sent something to that vendor and we want it to be immediately available. So if I would go into that PO, or if I would open up that voucher, or if I would open up that document, I will see that there's an attachment. See that there's a drop down here for notes and attachments. And one of the things is attachments. You can do notes. Most of you are probably familiar with the notes. The attachments is nice. So this will let you attach spreadsheets, Word documents, PDFs, and you can store them either locally or you can store them on a SharePoint site. So we're going to look at setting those up. And this is probably one of those areas that you're going to have an administrator do this, because there's a couple of things that are unique about it. And that's under the administration module under System Manager. It's called Attachments Configuration. And you have to set up every screen you're going to do this for before you'll see that attachments item in the drop-down where the notes are. The thing that's a little bit tricky about the attachments configuration, let's go back and look at that voucher screen. You can do attachments at 3 different levels. You can attach at the batch level, right? So you can see there's a yellow drop down here. You can attach at the document level, or you can attach at the transaction level. So it all depends on how that document relates. Is it a line item document? You know, maybe for every line in here, we have a different spec. We have a different PDF that tells us something about that line item. Or it's just document related. Typically, I don't see too many that apply to a whole batch where you're going to do an attachment, but you can. So when you go to set up an attachment, you have to decide first, what level am I going to do? Okay. And what's tricky is you do an F3 on the screen list. Okay, so everything's by screen. And you'll see that it's going to list every screen. Every screen has a number in front of it. You may or may not be familiar with that. I would assume most of you are. And each module starts, you know, with its own numbering. O1 is general ledger. O2 is payroll. O3 is payables. So if we look at the voucher and adjustment screen, the one thing that's tricky about this, and we can always help you with this, and some places will have an IT person that can find this out, you have to know the table. So if I do an F3 here, it's going to list every table. I kind of wish that it filtered out based on the screen that I put in, but right now SL doesn't do that. It's going to list every table that's in Dynamics SL database. Most of them are actually fairly obvious. Like if I'm doing the accounts payable, there's a screen called AP Doc, so that means it's the document level. And then they have one called AP Tran, the transaction level. So when we were in our screen, you know, this is the document level and this is the transaction level. So it's, like I said, it's fairly obvious, but not always. It's obvious to me because I've been doing this for a long time, but there is a way for someone to go in fairly easily if they have access to customized mode to determine what those tables are. If you want it to be as easy to set it up, I don't want to come in here and have to guess. So what I usually recommend is that when you're in the screen, and again, this involves something that most people don't have access to, and you certainly don't want people to have access to. but it's called customize mode. And we're going to cover a little bit more about customize mode in a little while because it's extremely powerful and it gets back to that flexibility in SL, the ability to customize pretty much anything in SL, from menus to screens to input to reports. Everything's customizable, but obviously some require a certain amount of work, and they also require a certain amount of expertise. And they also, you have to have the rights to be able to do it. So when I'm in the voucher and entry screen, if I go into what's called customize mode, some of you may be familiar with it. Oops. What else do I have open here? Open twice. You can only have one screen open at a time when you go into customize mode, and it'll tell you. So the easiest way for me, I'm not a developer, but I do understand how this works, is to go into what's called the customize mode, and I click on the customize dropdown, and I get this list of items. And if I tell it insert an item, what it's asking me to do is to pick, what do I want to insert? So if you think about our screen, we have document level and we have transaction level. Do I want to insert a field at the document level or at the transaction level? So this screen has to have links into the tables that we're going to use. Okay? So if I'm doing a document attachment, I need to know the names of those tables. So if I do an insert and then I click on this text box, and again, I'm not expecting you to, this isn't training in that I'm expecting you to remember all this, but I want you to realize that it's here and that it's something that you definitely want to work with someone in your organization to implement this. But when I tell it next, it's going to show me the table names in this column, AP Doc and AP Trans. So I can look at this and I say, I don't want the batch level. I'm not worried about the vendor or the terms. So it's pretty obvious to me it's AP Doc and AP Trans. And it's always going to be one of the ones at the top. So I can see that I have AP Doc and AP Trans. So that's going to tell me that when I do my document attachment, I'm going to want to pick that table. So if I go back to 03010, margin adjustment, I'm going to pick AP Doc. We're going to do it. I think I already have it set up for AP Doc. Right. So I'm telling it now, I said, this is my screen. This is the table. I'm going to use this folder, right? Oops, I didn't want to browse, I'm sorry. This is where I'm going to keep it again. This is typically going to be, some people will use like a SharePoint library, or they'll use like a shared server folder somewhere that the right people have access to. You may have an accounts payable folder on the shared server. You may have an accounts receivable, a project. So you can have different folders, and then each attachment's configuration can point to the one that's relevant for that screen. So once that's been set up, and then you're in the voucher and entry screen, you have the ability to attach a document. And the nice thing is, no matter who opens up that screen, they're going to see that document. Here I can do attachments, and that's going to have to, I want to upload or link it. Okay, uploading it means I'm going to grab it from like maybe my hard drive and store it somewhere, or if it's already stored somewhere, then I'm just going to do a link. And more than likely, the link is going to be the situation because you usually want to store your documents in one place. All your AP, all your projects, etc., service calls, whatever, are going to have all their documents in one location. So I really like the attachments feature because instead of having someone having to go, okay, I'm in this purchase order, or I'm in this voucher, I'm in this service call, I want to see a document related to that. I can just bring up that service call, or purchase order, whatever, click on that drop down, it's going to show me you can have multiple documents, so you can have as many as you want attached to it. So I like the document attachment, especially if you're an organization that tends to have a lot of documents that are related to their business. Like I said, whether it's project, service calls, even inventory. You may have manufacturer specifications or something that you need to include when you do a purchase order, to a vendor, because these are the specs, that we need, because our customer or our client that we're buying this for has these requirements. Maybe it says it has to be US made, whatever it is. We can have all these specs. So it's nice to be able to attach them right to the document. Okay, so that's the document attachment. Again, another feature I really like. I don't think it's used as much as it could be. The next one we're going to do is called transaction import. Transaction import is a nice automated way to bring transactions and or maintenance items such as vendors, customers, projects into SL from a spreadsheet. And it can be done as a one-time event. You know, we've had clients where they'll buy, you know, another company, and we need to take their vendors from their current system and import them into SL. They may have 5,000 customers. So we're not going to sit there and manually type in 5,000 customers, but they can export those from their current system into a spreadsheet that has to be in a certain format. Then we can use transaction import to bring that in. And it works, if you watch transaction import, it's kind of neat because it's as if you're actually sitting at the screen and typing that information. You'll see the screen will flash and all the data is input. So I usually say if you're going to be doing more than 100 or 150 data input items at one particular time, transaction import is worth setting up. I also have clients that will do this on a regular basis. You know, they may have like a requisition system that's not integrated into SL, so they'll export it out into a CSV file, and we already have the format set up, and then they'll import it into SL, like on a daily, weekly, or whatever basis. So yeah, I have people that'll do it just, you know, once every so often as needed. I have other people that do it pretty much on a daily or weekly basis. So I'm going to show you some of the mechanics of it. And it's in some ways a little bit, I wouldn't say intimidating, but I think when you see how it's set up and the way it works, it makes sense. So there's two steps in doing a transaction import. First is you do this process called a control macro generator. And all this does is this creates a file for that particular screen. So let's say we're going to do the vendor screen. All right, so if we open up the vendor screen, I think it's easiest if you see the actual screen, and then the control file will make more sense. So on any vendor, we're going to have the vendor ID, name, terms, address, some default information, whether they're 1099 or not, etc. So you're going to have all that information that we need to input. So if you're going to add this vendor, you would physically just type all this information in. But if we wanted to use transaction import, the first thing we'll do is we'll create a macro generator. So we're going to find our vendor screen, which is 03270. There, oops, one more. There's two different types you can do. I never do simple. It's always going to be intelligent. Nice name. But we're going to tell it, where do I want to put this? So I'm going to throw it up on a desktop so we can take a look at it. And we're going to call this vendor. This process, I typically find most of my clients, at least initially, will, get our assistance. Maybe work with them for a little bit, show them the basics of what they need to do. Then they'll run with it. We'll try and do an import. If they run into any issues, they'll come back to us and say, hey, Dan, or whoever, I'm getting these errors, or this isn't working. We'll help them resolve that. So it usually takes a little bit of upfront work, for us, and then maybe a little bit on the back end to get it, any errors resolved. So we're going to pick the vendor one, and it's going to say it's going to throw it on the desktop. It's going to be called vendor CTL. Tell it OK. It'll flash up, and then it's going to throw this file right there. So if we look at this file and we compare this to the vendor maintenance screen, you'll see that it makes sense, even though it's kind of in a weird format in some ways. But you'll see that there's two levels. In this case, actually, there's 4 levels, but we're only going to use this level. If we were importing vouchers, like we talked about with the document attachment, we would have 2 levels. The document level and then the line level. You could have 1, 2, 5, 10 lines. So those would all be at a different level. But in this case, for vendors, there's only 1 level. So at level 0, which is vendor, you'll see it has a vendor ID, it has the vendor class, right? It has the same thing that you're going to see on the screen. And most of the names make sense. Name, terms, whether it's multi-check, right? Separate check. So you'll see there's a number next to all of these. So what we need to do is we need to create a spreadsheet. Like the example I was using before, we have a customer coming in, and I apologize, I'm going to have to move a little bit quicker. I'm kind of getting behind. But then you have a spreadsheet that matches up to all these items, right? And then you run the import, and it, like I said, it'll actually opens up the screen, and you'll see it as if you're sitting there typing. So, and that's the transaction import screen, which is right here. You tell it what your CSV file is, where the data is, you tell it the screen, and you tell it that control file that we just created, right? You begin processing, and it'll go through and actually do the import for you. And it has different levels. I can do an edit only, which is what I always do first. And then once I don't have any errors, then I'll run, after everything works, then I'll run the actual update. So transaction import, very powerful way to get data in from a spreadsheet. Kind of almost like a copy and paste, but without the copy and pasting. Okay, now we're going to look at what I term tips and tricks. These are things that are in SL. They're not they're not these, big things like you might have with transaction import or, menu maintenance, et cetera. But they're just little things that if I get like a new client or I haven't worked with the client in a while, and we're going through and maybe looking at a problem, maybe I get a support call, or they're implementing a new process, and I'll see them doing something, and I'll say, why are you doing that? Or did you know you could do this? And I find there's usually a lot of things that they don't understand or they don't see or realize it's in SL. And so we're just going to look at like, a dozen of those things that I find that I think are really, really helpful. The first one is, and this happens a lot, and I find it seems to be like probably the most common screen for me to run into this is under reports. When you go to run a report, and checks is one that happens a lot, you have this drop down, right? Where I can say, what kind of check am I going to do? And when you print a check, you can have the check at the bottom and maybe two stubs up above. You can have the check in the middle, a stub above, and a stub below, right? So you can have, 2 or 3 different types of checks. And a lot of people will come in here every time, they use multi-stubs. So every time they open this up, they change it to multi-stub. And I'll say, you can change that default. You can change the order that they're listed here. And they'll say, oh, really? So to do that, go back to admin. There's a screen called Report Control Maintenance. So if I look at the check one, you'll see it lists exactly what I saw right there. I can do a couple different things as far as, let's say I wanted to move number 2 up to number 1, right? I could come over here, let me make this a little bit wider so you can see everything. I could copy that just by doing a Control-C, which is, functionality pretty much anywhere in a grid you can do in SL. I could come down here and paste it. So I don't want to lose that option. Then if I delete that one, now my multi-stub is my first one. Likewise, I could export those to Excel, just by using the Excel button here, change them and copy and paste it back in. So the report control maintenance, you don't run into it a lot where you need to make those kind of changes, but I know the check one is that I run into that quite a bit. You can also use this to create different versions of reports. So a lot of times I'll get someone who will say, you know what, my AT aging is great, but I want, and I did this recently for somebody, said, I want it to show me the detail for each one of those documents, not just the document level. I want to see the detail, and I want to see only if it's a project-related one, and I want to see the project account category. So I created a whole separate version of that report, and I called it, it was like project, whatever it was. And I gave that report, instead of calling it, I didn't want to save over the existing ones. And again, this is the check one, but I called it maybe 03620 PR for project. So I always like to let people know too, just because we have these canned reports in there, you're not limited to that. I mean, SL, another one of the features when it comes to being customizable are the reports. So I showed you just how to change the order of these, but I also encourage people to, if you don't have the report that you want and you have to export it to Excel and you have to do something to it, to me, that's crazy. If every time you run that report, you're exporting it and reformatting it, first of all, talk internally. You know, maybe you have a crystal report person that can go in and make some changes. You know, if not, ask, you know, like SIS and say, hey, what would it take to reformat this, add it as a separate version? Because sometimes it's only a couple hours, right? So we'll put in a couple hours to do this for you, and then you save, you know, an hour every week, you know, or 20 minutes every day, whatever it is. So it's definitely something to keep in mind from the report standpoint, being able to add things to those drop downs. Another one that's interesting that a lot of people don't realize, and I like this one a lot too. I'll probably say that about everything, but let's look at the vendor one. So when you do an F3, right now we have 4 columns. You can have up to 6 columns. I think it's 6. Maybe they even increased it. But I can change what I see in this F3. I'm not limited to ID, name, phone, and zip. I need to keep the ID because that's the key on this field. I can remove the zip and add the state, or I can leave the zip and add the state, right? I can add the address 1. You know, I can add an email address. I can add any field that's available in that vendor table to this F3. Again, it's not something that you're going to sit down and do on a regular basis, and it usually requires some assistance from SIS. But if I go back into customize mode, okay, I can see what that field, what the lookup value is for that. So I'm in customize mode. I click on that field. I hit the F4 button. Always going to be listed under this property called PV. So in this case, we have one called vendor underscore all. So there is a CSV file kept in the SL directory. Let's take a look at this. SL under applications. It's under the DB folder. So there's this thing called pvrect.csv. First of all, you never want to open it up in Excel, even though it's a CSV file. Always want to open it up in Notepad. I'm going to say open with Notepad. Now I'm going to do a search for that item that we just saw. I'm going to say find underscore ALL. Next. Okay. So I found it. Here it is. So I am going to copy this. Okay. So there's the whole thing right there. It always starts and ends with those quotes. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to throw this into a new file. You always want to copy and start in the new file. You never want to edit the one that's here. Okay. And you'll see it's telling me vendor ID, vendor name, vendor phone, vendor zip. I could change zip to state. Or I could add one. I could leave zip in there and add state. Like I said, you can have up to 6 columns. And then once you add that column, when you do an F3, you can sort and you can search on that column. So if you're always doing an F3 and you want to find all your customers in California, we can add the state. And that's a pretty simple one to do. So when I save that folder, then I just have to do an import of that. Back up in admin, I can import that using the possible values import. I'd go out and find that file that I saved, and I did save one for vendor maintenance, right? So I could do that, then I could process it, and then it's going to add state to that lookup. So PV values, pretty easy to change. Not something you're going to do a lot, but absolutely something to keep in mind as an option. Okay, reporting. You know, the old way from a reporting standpoint, if you wanted to send someone a report, like a PDF copy of it, you would print the report on paper, or you might print it to a PDF, save it on your, your desktop somewhere. You might print it and scan it and save it, and then go into email, do an attachment, and then send it. Well, I think in 2015 or 2011 it started, definitely in 2015, which is what we're in right now. We're in 2015. You can go into, let's go back into AP. Say we want to send an aged AP report to somebody. You can email directly from the preview. I have my print to file turned on, so I'll turn that off. I'm going to preview this report. Look at it and I say, okay, I'm going to send this to somebody. On the menu bar at the top, there's an email button. If you click on it, it brings up the email file interface. I say PDF. Okay, and it's going to go ahead and open up Outlook if it isn't already running, but it's going to create an email for me to send to somebody. I can send it to myself. And I'd probably give it a subject. And I might say, right? Now I can send that. So that's as easy it is just to attach a PDF or any other type of Excel spreadsheet of that report and email it to someone. So again, something that cuts out a couple steps rather than exporting it, saving it, going into Outlook. Another nice feature. Going to go back to the customize mode. This is something that I've done for a couple customers, and I think I almost want to say it's saved them some real issues. The one client does like fire suppression equipment as well as installations, et cetera, but they have like a warehouse where they sell stuff, and they have this very complicated sales price structure. For this customer group, they get 10% off. This one gets 12%. So it's very complicated, and it very much affects their bottom line, because it affects the gross margins. So when they set up a new customer, we added a label to the customer maintenance screen. This was done via the customize mode. We added a label that says, and it's like in bright red letters. Let's go ahead and pull up a customer. So if I wanted to add a label, I think we just put it pretty much over here. I went into customize mode, just like we did earlier. I go back into customize, insert object wizard. Again, don't expect you to remember this, but just know it's available. Get someone in your organization or SIS to assist. But you want to pick the type of label. Really, a label is just this thing, status, class ID. Those are labels, right? So label really doesn't affect the transactions or affect the process or anything. It's just strictly that. It's a label. So tell apply. I close this. I have this label now. I can drag this over here. I can F4 on that. And I can say, I don't want to call it label. I'm going to call this one just test. Right? But like what we did here was we said, okay, let's make the font color. Let's make it red so that it really sticks out. Okay? Again, in this case, the other one had said, make sure you enter the sales price information for this customer. So every time you get a new customer, that would kind of stick out to them. So if I go ahead and save these changes, next time I open up the customer maintenance, it has that label on it. So I like that a lot. It's a way to put things on screen that's telling someone they need to do something or to check something, did you do this? So again, another nice feature. Next one is a financial process in the general ledger, which is fairly new too. And again, I don't know if people realize, and actually, I have to admit, a lot of times I forget that it's there. But when you do journal entries, I was an auditor for a number of years for a CPA firm. And, how often do we have to do reversing entries? Or as a controller, how many times do I have to do reversing entries? All the time. Someone made an entry, it's wrong, or it's in the wrong period, whatever, right? You need to reverse it. So if you pick a batch, let's say you pick a posted one, or even an unposted one, you can go into these little buttons next to the batch number. If you click on that, it opens up this screen. So I have three options. I can reverse this entry. It's going to actually create an entry which reverses the debits and credits in the journal transaction. It'll create a whole new batch that reverses it. Or I can do this one, which will do the same thing. It'll reverse it, but then it'll also create a second batch with the same debits and credits, but I can go in and change them, right? Maybe the amounts were wrong, right? So I've reversed the first one as if it didn't happen, but I still wanted to maintain that structure, maybe the accounts or whatever, and then I'll have a third batch where I can go in and actually change the amounts. Or I could just strictly do a copy of that. I had a big journal entry, 50 lines long. Now, if you're going to do it every month, you'd probably do like a recurring entry, but you can also copy here. So if I pick this, if I say reverse, it's going to actually create an actual batch that's reversing that. Like, I can release it. I can actually change the period if I want to, and it also refers to the original batch number, which is pretty nice. So I like that feature, especially as an accountant, the controller, where you're going in and doing a lot of corrections like that. I'm going to look at these items that we have left and pick one that I think, because we're kind of running short on time here. We looked at the customize, and one other thing about customize mode is you can hide fields, right? So if I never want to see the labor class on this screen, I can go into customize mode. I can find labor class, F4 on that field, or actually I can just right click on it and say, I don't want to see it, I don't want it to be enabled, and I don't want it to be a tab stop, okay? So I've just removed that, so if I save changes, close it, and you see how easy that is? I mean, it's not hard to do. So you can easily hide fields that you don't want. So that field's gone now. We can also change the order of the field. So when you're entering something, you're going tab, 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 tab. I know, especially on like the voucher screen, or even this screen, hey, I don't want the reference number there. I don't want the date there. I don't want I want debit and credit to be the next things, right here. So I can go back into customize mode, and I can say, change the sort order. So this thing right down here, this tab index, 35, if I wanted to put the debit after that, I would go down to the debit amount and change the sort order on this to 36. That means it's going to follow the account. So definitely something to keep in mind, that screens can be customized. And I actually have a lot of clients that have people in-house that do that. They're very comfortable with that. But one really, really, really important qualifier is, if you're that person that's going to be making these changes, you always go into administration. And if that screen's already been customized, and a screen's been customized if it has a little asterisk on it. I don't know if you're all aware of that or not. But if it has that asterisk, that means it's been customized, right? So before I make any changes to that customized screen, even though I just broke my own rule, I didn't export it, you want to go into export. And you can pick the one you want to do, in this case, 0100, right? Then I can click on export, pick where I want it to go, begin processing. That way, it creates what's called a CST file. If you look at the end of this, you'll see that this is a CST file. And then you could re-import. If you go in and just totally botch your customization or just didn't do what you wanted, you can re-import the way it was before you made those changes, as long as you've exported it. So very important part of doing any screen customization is always to export it first. The function keys. I'm going to show you this. There's this, and maybe I could have Debbie. Maybe we can even include this in with. I guess we'll see it here if they look at the recording. But there's a few of these things in here that people don't always realize or use. I think one of the things that's not used much, it's really a great tool, is the help menu. Can tell you how many times I'll be doing training and you have this really obscure field on like the project maintenance screen, because there's just so many different fields, and I'm not exactly sure how to explain that field. If I hit the F1 button, it brings up the help screen. It's that simple. Hit F1, help, and it's going to tell you, it's going to list all the fields on that screen. And then if you click on it, it'll give you a description of that field. So really, really nice help in here. I love the help, much more than some of the other programs I've worked with, which don't have good help. This is context sensitive. So whatever screen you're in, when you hit F1, it's going to open that help. Okay? So the help is absolutely a great key. F4, if you're in a grid, it toggles between the form view or grid view. So if we're down here, if I hit F4, right? Now I can see everything on that line. In the form view, go back to grid view. I think most people know that. Oh, when you're in a grid too, I like this one also. When you're in a grid, a lot of people hit the scroll bar to go, back and forth. If I'm in here, if I hit end, it'll take me to the last field. If I hit home, it brings me back to the first field in the grid. So I like that also. Another good keystroke. Okay, a couple more minutes. Actually, I'm going to show you what I like. One more thing I like. As we went through all of these screens and processes and different things you can do, a lot of it was table-based and field-based, like what is this field for? There's a thing under help. So if you go to help, Go to Help Topics. If you go all the way down to the bottom, there's a thing called Schema. And then it has it broken down into the different areas, financial projects. So if I look at financial, I look at AP Doc, this is really nice. This will show me, give me a description of every field in that table. And it'll usually show me what the values can be in that field, right? So if I look at like document type, tells me whether it's a check, CK is equal check, AC is credit adjustment, AD, VO is voucher, right? So the schema for all the different tables is awesome. It's a great tool. I use it a lot, especially when I'm doing like crystal reports or if I'm doing a customization or, I look at the data, right? I'm getting some data out of a report and it has, document type is, AD, and I've never done an AD. I don't know what AD is, or SC, it's a stop check or zero check. A lot of times I come in here and I will find my answer. So a great tool under Help, under Schema, under Help Topics, you go all the way down to the bottom under Schema. All right, I think that's getting us right towards the end. Debbie, I think we were going to kind of open it up to see if anybody had any questions.
Hi, Dan. Yes, we do have a quick question. We have one question in. Please feel free to enter questions in the chat or the question box. We're happy to answer any question. It said, how does one get changed in the purchasing and inventory modules, goods for inventory? It does not allow changes to the, does not allow changes to the account and sub-account on receipts. We'd like to have those fields available to change. How can we get MS to fix that?
It depends. Yeah, that's fine. Because I'm going to answer, because it is a good question, and it is, I think a lot of people get hung up on that. It depends on the type of the purchase that you're making. If it's goods for inventory or goods for project inventory, it will not let you change the account. It's going to force it always to go to the inventory account. A lot of these you'll find they won't let you change that account unless you're doing like the ones that definitely let you change. If you're doing like a services for expense, this one's always going to let you change it. Okay, it's always going to let you pick the account. But if it's anything that's going to hit inventory, it's always going to force it to that account 130 because you don't want your inventory valuation to get out of sync with your general ledger inventory number. So I hope that answers that question. And the other thing I would encourage you to do, here's my email address right here. If you ever, have a question like that, if you're thinking of something later on, or it's tomorrow, or it's 2 weeks from now, absolutely feel free to shoot me an email and with any question like that. We can either, I can email you back if it's something that's simple, or we could jump on a GoToMeeting even and take a look at it. So very open to that. Like I said, I've been on the other end. I've been a controller. I've been an end user. And I realize that a lot of times people get frustrated, and there's usually like a simple answer for a lot of those situations that can be resolved very quickly, and the people will go, oh, that's it? That's all I had to do? And then they might realize, an hour a week savings from something else that they were doing. So I encourage questions. If we can't do them here, feel free to shoot me an email, or even shoot Debbie an email. Right, Debbie? You can forward it to me.
Absolutely. So just another quick question. Who can update and modify the SL menus?
Someone that has access rights to that administration option right there in menu maintenance. Typically, it's limited to 1 or 2 people. Now, some organizations just do not have that type of a person. In that case, they'll usually come to us, to myself or, one of the other consultants, and you could send a request into our support desk saying, I want to make a change. And again, it normally does not take a lot of time. It's not going to cost a lot of money. I find that the efficiencies that are gained are usually well worth the money that's spent.
Okay. There's another question. Is there a way to add link attachments through an import?
Link attachments to, you mean like the transaction import? So the import, I don't, you know what, that's a really good question, Debbie. This is one of those ones where I think we're going to have to record it. And whoever asked it, what you may want to do, because I'm a little bit unclear exactly the nature of the question, so you may want to clarify it a little bit and shoot me an email, and then we can talk about it. But that's a great question. I've never been posed that, and I'm not sure.
Okay, and we'll get back. We'll respond to that question a little bit later, and after the webinar, see if we can get some clarification and get a response for you.
Love to. Yeah.
How long does it typically take to set up and process a transaction import?
It depends. There's two different, the maintenance ones, like just only vendors or customers. I did one a couple weeks ago. Literally did it in a GoToMeeting. It took us 2 hours. And actually, the transaction was the only one that gets complicated. I would say on average, you're looking at 2 to 4 hours of maybe the SIS time. And again, it depends on, the user's abilities. We have some clients that have someone that's much more adept at that, but usually 2 to 4 hours. The only one that gets a little bit weird sometimes, believe it or not, is the purchase order one. But I'd say in general, 2 to 4 hours max, we can get you set up and get you importing.
Okay. Any other questions? Dan, we're running out of time, so if you could quickly go to the next slide, we'll go real quick. Thank you. What was before? That one. There you go. Just quick, I want to let you guys remind you to please register for the Dynamics SL User Group Conference held in St. Louis, Missouri. We'll have registration details more to come. This is a great place for more education and networking and learning from users who are working in the system just like you. And it's for every level of experience, beginner to advanced to power user. Also for IT and accounting, there's something here for everyone. So we certainly look forward to seeing you there. SIS will be there, and we're one of the sponsors, and we're just, we welcome you all to come. Next slide. If you have any further questions about your Dynamics SL solution or any of the presentation that you've seen today, please contact us. We're happy to answer any questions. We're happy to schedule any calls for you. My name is Debbie Peavy. I'm the Customer Relations Manager here at SIS, and my contact information is on the slide. We certainly look forward to seeing you, and thank you so much for joining us. We're looking forward to next month to have our year-end closing webinar. More details will be coming, and we're hoping to help you have a successful close of your Dynamics SL books. Thank you so much. Join us next month, and we look forward to having you. And Dan, thank you very much.
Thank you, Debbie, for getting it together, and thank you, everybody, for attending. And again, like I said, if you have questions or just want to reach out, please feel free.
Have a good day.
Thanks, everybody.